So I went to Cairo last year for the first time. I was there for
Oh,
like,
excellent.
so you said you were there for a year?
Yeah.
Talk about that, because I'm so interested.
Yeah. The story I always tell is I live in a part of town where I'd often take a taxi to campus. And when I first got there, I would pay 5 Egyptian pounds for the taxi ride. And if I gave them £5, then they'd ask for 7, 10, or 15. And because I was paying 5, they knew I didn't know the price, so they would ask for more. After I lived there for a while, I would pay 2 Egyptian pounds and no one would ever say anything to me. So if I would pay 5, they would say, give me 10, give me 15. If I paid 2, they'd just drive away.
Peace, peace, and welcome to another edition of Cook on Monday Morning. At Cook on Monday Morning, we are building lives and make us excited about Monday morning. We believe that if you can own Monday morning, you can own the week. If you can own the week, you can own the year. And if you change your year, you can change your life. Today, I have Mr. Yusef Freeman, a good brother that's doing really interesting housing work in the Bay Area. We've crossed paths a number of times. He is one of the last Black men in the Bay Area. And he's always been really friendly, generous, supportive. He is also something of a watch connoisseur. He's been putting me up on game the last few times we've spoken. I'm new to the intricacies of that whole space. So I look forward to getting to know more about him, his upbringing, his career, his insights as a parent, what he's been doing since the pandemic has started, and talk more about other various topics that may come up. Mr. Freeman, thank you, sir.
Good to see you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you too.
So is the Freeman last name, is there a story behind that, or?
I'm sure there is.
Okay.
You know, one of the crazy things about, lineage is we are descendants of slaves is, we've spent a bunch of times trying to trace our roots and get back and understand the lineage. And I've been only able to go as far back as my great grandfather's father. And the crazy thing about that is I knew my great grandmother. I remember spending time with her. She passed when I was in elementary school, and I would visit her every summer. And so the fact that I can only go, one generation beyond who I knew in person is kind of sad. But the Freeman name, obviously, I would assume obviously was taken by the first generation of no longer being in bondage somewhere down in Alabama or Mississippi, which is where my roots are on my father's lineage.
And what does Yusef mean?
Yusef is just Joseph in Arabic. And, both my parents are Black. My dad used to say, if someone asks you your ethnicity, you can tell them you're half African-American, a quarter Black, and a quarter Negro. But so, yeah, I mean, just that's who we are, where we're from. And my parents really enjoyed the music of Yusef Lateef. And so I was named after him, jazz musician out of Detroit. When I was in grad school, I had a little radio show called The World is Funked when I was at NYU, and I would start every show with a cut from Yusef Lateef, my namesake.
Was your show a jazz show?
It was more kind of global funk. So some jazz would get in there, but it was mostly funk from 1960s through current times. It was a good time. It was Sunday afternoon. Got a decent amount of listeners back then, long time ago.
That's the love making hour, man. Sunday.
There you go.
You was on with the folk, with the. It's only right. That's righteous. So all right. So I kind of skipped over. Do you know the story of Joseph in the Bible?
I do, and then there's the story of Yusuf in the Quran as well.
Okay, I don't know the one about Yusuf in the Quran. What's that
So,
one?
little bit of pressure that coming with the name. So apparently, the Prophet Yusuf was so beautiful that when the Queen of Sheba was preparing the meal, she actually cut her finger off because she was captivated by his beauty and didn't pay attention to what she was doing. So little
Wow.
pressure with that. I wish I could be on those levels, but I learned that when I was studying in Egypt. And people, I would introduce myself, and people would say, "Oh, do you know the story of Yusuf from the Quran?"
Uh-huh. Well, they probably said that because you're very handsome. You're a very handsome man. So that's probably why they were like, if you weren't attractive, they were like, oh, that's cool.
Take it. I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting part about that is that, there is this story about in the Joseph story, the biblical story about him being falsely accused of rape by the by the Pharaoh's wife. And like she really wanted him, and he was like, not engaging because he worked for the Pharaoh, and then she accused him of rape, and then he was sent to prison. And so that Joseph must have been attractive too. He was something to he
There you go.
drew people to him.
It's probably the same story. I mean, these religions are rooted in the same places, and Islam is viewed as a progression of the people of the book, if you will. I'm not Muslim. I'm a Baha'i, which also believes in progressive revelation and views Jesus and Muhammad and Moses and our latest Baha'u'llah all as manifestations of God or prophets of God. So, all these religions are really rooted in the same place. It's amazing we keep fighting each other over it all over the world.
Yeah, this is the most I've ever talked about faith on the podcast. I appreciate
Sorry,
it.
Man.
All right, I swear we're going to get into your upbringing. So we heard a little bit already. Where'd you grow up?
I'm originally from East Oakland, out by Eastmont Mall, but grew up a lot in Sacramento. My dad was working for the state and was commuting from Oakland on a daily basis to Sacramento, and it got to be too much, so we headed that way and ended up growing up out there.
Are you only child?
I am.
What area of Sacramento?
South Side. So
South
near Flora Mall, for those who are familiar with Sacramento.
Got it.
Or where Flora Mall used to be, I should say, got demolished.
Mm-hmm. What were some of it sounds like there was intention, just in your name, right, between your parents, like, did that carry over into the types of lessons they tried to impose on you, or the type of lifestyle that they led? Like, what were your parents like? What was your upbringing like?
Yeah, growing up, as crazy as this might sound, was pretty easy for me. And to this day, I don't have a full appreciation of why I grew up sharing the same expectations for myself as my parents had for me. And that's sort of a magic that happened within our family, that I would love to be able to also have with my children, but I don't know how or why that is. My mother very much dedicated her life to my happiness and success, taking jobs that would allow for a schedule so that I could get to my various sports practices, classes, extracurricular activities. I was a musician, things like that. I had a lot of opportunity from that standpoint. And my father, during most of my childhood, worked for the state of California. He initially was running disaster response for emergency medical services for the state, which, if he was still in that role today, would have been very interesting during the pandemic. And then he became the first head of the state's Office of Multicultural Health. So he was a career bureaucrat before becoming one of the original executives of the California Endowment and Philanthropy. And then he went off to do his own consulting. And before he unfortunately became ill with early onset dementia and Alzheimer's, some of the last work that he was doing was working with multi-ethnic health organizations throughout the state of California, and spending a lot of time working in rural American Indian clinics on reservations and helping for their health system disaster preparedness. And unfortunately, we buried my father last month. He succumbed to the illness of Alzheimer's, which was accelerated due to the pandemic. My mother is still extremely fit and focused, and retired from the county of Sacramento. And my 95-year-old grandmother lives with her, and she's got 5 sisters that are all in Northern California, and the family is doing well.
I remember one of our text conversations, you told me about your father, and rest in power to your father.
Appreciate it.
Sounds like a great man that gave a lot and did a lot of important work. Did they have mantras or sayings, like, did they repeat it? Did you have a household like that or no?
Yes and no. So my mother had a knack. So I'm like 6'5". And I know I'm not your.
I was gonna get into your height. Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah, I know I'm not your tallest guest, but brother Brandon had me destroyed on that level. But my mother had a knack when I was a child of getting me to do whatever she wanted by telling me if I didn't, it would stunt my growth. And for whatever reason, I wanted to be tall when I was a little kid, and so I would, kind of pivot and do whatever she said, because I didn't want my growth to be stunted. But my mother in particular, I would say that is as much as I want to be almost exactly like my father and look up to him, it was really the values from my mother that she instilled upon me that I think led to, what I've been able to achieve in life thus far. And a lot of that was really kind of subtly rooted in understanding my Blackness, and that not that I would necessarily have to work harder than others, but that I'd have to do it better. And so, putting no judgments, because certain things come easier or harder to folks. So not putting a judgment on what's hard and what's not. And really an expectation that you shouldn't have an expectation that life would be easy. I mean, she would always say life is hard. And I think fundamentally, like, as tasks are before me, I either don't consider them to be hard, or I don't have an expectation that they shouldn't be, because maybe my mother did instill that in me, that life is hard, but that, there are people in this world who are going to get things just because of what they look like or who their parents are, and recognizing I shouldn't be intimidated by that, because they have it not necessarily through effort or hard work, or because they deserve it, just because of circumstance. And so once you put that away, and there's no intimidation because you look different or anything like that, it's just sort of like, okay, you have this path to get there, and it's possible to cross that path, so just go do it.
Yeah, you mentioned achievement and the path, and it sounds like you had parents that were devoted to their work, and the broad way that you talked about their careers. Was there you're an only child, was there like a moment where you were like, I could be better, or you were like, I wish I was better, like coming up in your childhood? Was there like a pivot, or were you just always like, I got to be the best? Like, how did that show up for you growing up?
Again, sort of with the shared expectations, there was always a path that, being raised in a way, even though, we weren't wealthy by any means, but solidly middle class, with both of my parents having 2 very good, government jobs. that there's no difference between graduating middle school and going to high school than graduating high school and going to college. It wasn't like this big thing. It's just sort of what you do next. And they came up though in a time where it's like, okay, there's not a lot of specialization. You go to college and you can study anything and then sort of figure it out from a degree standpoint. And I'm a bit older than you, but even in my generation, and then even more so, with yours, that there's a lot more specialization now. So, for example, there was no such thing as a master's in public health when my father was coming out of school, but so he didn't have that type of degree, but he got to run the Office of Multicultural Health for the state. Like, I'm sure you have to study public health now to have that kind of role, right? But I still was just in the mentality of just, keep going to school, kind of get your education, study what's interesting, and you can figure out the other part when it comes to that time. And then in retrospect, I probably wouldn't give my children that same advice, because I think there's a little more specialization now, and it's kind of more important, the content, what you study, if you have an interest in a particular career.
Would you consider yourself competitive?
Absolutely.
And that competitive, you said that with such conviction.
Oh yeah.
let's get into that. Like, how did that start? Like, when did you first recognize, like, I have to win, I hate to lose? Like, what is there a story behind that?
It goes from sports to board games to to grades on stuff that wasn't subjective. So, there's a guy who was the best man at my wedding. He's been my best friend since kindergarten. And he just had his first child earlier this week. And I can remember, in elementary school and in junior high, like, okay, what did you get on this math test? Like, we're jockeying there, I'm playing sports, competing against others, but also competing against, myself. The sport that I had the most success in growing up was swimming, and I swam in college until my sophomore year. And, with that, it's about improving your own times and having your own personal records and going out the next time. And can I be a little bit faster here, a little bit faster there? And just the single focus during training to improve and just get, and in some cases, there's a huge difference between being a second faster, and in some races, a tenth of a second faster could be the difference between getting a scholarship or not. And just that drive and that monolithic focus was a big part of my identity, I would say, from like age 10, when I really first started competing, through my sophomore year in college.
And so was that to go in high school, get a scholarship?
It was, yeah.
And where did you do your undergrad?
A lot of places. So I got a scholarship to swim at Fordham University in New York, which is a small Division I school in the Bronx. And so I went out there, and they had a Black assistant coach, and they had two other Black swimmers from California, and I roomed with one of them, and I made it 3 semesters out there, and it was cold and it was dreary. And so middle of sophomore year, I transferred to UC Berkeley, got lost on campus my first semester there, stumbled into the study abroad office, and ended up in Egypt for my junior year. Played on the American University in Cairo's basketball team, which was a blast. Came back that summer, studied at University of Washington under the PPIA fellowship, and then finished my last year at Berkeley after that. So also had some summers in community colleges and all that. Public policy and international affairs. Was this great fellowship program that was targeted toward people of color who are interested in public policy or international affairs. And there were a number of sponsored, universities around the country where you spend the summer after your junior year of college studying urban planning, international affairs, public policy. And then after you graduate, they'll pay for you to study kind of any project you want. So I ended up going to Morocco and studying Arabic out there that summer. And then they pay for your grad school. And I ended up at NYU. So it was a great opportunity. It's gone through a few different forms. At one point, it was called the Woodrow Wilson Fellows. And then it had another name as well that I don't remember, but I've met a number of folks over the years, and actually had a boss that was an alum of the original iteration of the program, which really helped in that job that I had for 12 years.
Yeah, all right. So I want to get into Cairo. I want to get into leaving swimming. And I want to talk about UC Berkeley. So of those three, where you want to start?
Oh man. I guess we can go in order. Leaving swimming is fine.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah. All right, so swimming is the catalyst. It's like the you want to get a scholarship, you get the scholarship, you're swimming. Yep. Okay, what happens?
So go out to Fordham, everything's going great, freshman year. Then just some weird kind of physical stuff happens and my strokes kind of break down. I'm not going as fast as I used to. And it was, at that age, you're just supposed to be getting better and better. And while I was in ridiculous shape, like I still laugh at like being, at the time, 6'4", 205, 4% body fat, but slower than when I was $160 blowing the wind skinny in high school. And so it just wasn't working out for me out there. And then when that winter hit, even though I would go back to the East Coast a couple more times after that, I just wasn't ready for that. So I decided to come back to the Bay.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you often, or that I associate with swimmers, is being like in great shape, and not like especially like really muscular, but like really fit. And,
yeah.
And I don't swim well. That's like I tried to do a triathlon. And
okay, which one?
Word.
which triathlon?
So I attempted a half Ironman in New Orleans. And
I know that one.
It couldn't get through the swim. So we gotta talk later can tell me something.
We gotta talk later, and you're a brave man for attempting to swim in Lake Pontchartrain. I'll tell you that. I spent a solid 3-4 years of my life going down to New Orleans every week between Tuesday and Thursday, and was going to do that triathlon myself until I saw the swim was in the lake.
All right, so quick story about that, because it was like thunderstorming the leading up to the race. The night before, they said they were going to cancel the swim, and the swim was the part I knew I was going to have the most trouble with. So I was like, yes. And they said they were going to cancel it because of the storm and the levels of fecal matter in the water.
Right. That's right. That's what I remember. Yep.
Had increased to a level that was no longer safe. So this was like 11 p.m. and we got to get out there like at 4 a.m. something early. And then on the way there, they say the swim is back on. So like the mental flips.
Nope.
I was like, there's fecal matter.
Fecal matter, cool. I completely remember that. What year was this? Do you remember what year that was?
This must have been 2015. This is 2015.
Okay. Yeah, that was after I looked at it. But that whole fecal matter thing had been an issue for the swim of that race, even back when I was looking at it in like 2008, 2009, when I was going down there every week. I did triathlons for a minute myself, but had to retire from that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. I want to get into that too, because you seem like the person that stays active. So, all right. So do you think it was at all connected to anything that's related to like sports psychology, or you think it was like purely body related?
That's a question I was never actually able to figure out. And it's the strangest thing because, basically my entire life, I had a certain feel for the water. And when I first got to campus and was competing, I was doing very well. And I don't know if it was because the weight training changed and my body was changing, and so my feel for the water was changing, which was changing my feel for the water. I really don't know, but I'm sure it's all wrapped in there together, and I did my best to figure it out. And to this day, I mean, I still get out and swim for fitness. Before I had a couple of back surgeries, I was competing masters at a pretty good level and locally kind of won some races. But I never got that feel back that I had when I first stepped on campus. And so I don't know if it's a physical or a psychological thing, but it's probably a mixture of both.
Yeah, I have a theory.
Yeah.
It was
Let's
women.
hear it. Probably. Lord knows there wasn't that type of distraction for me in high school, unfortunately.
Yeah, women messed you up, bro. That's what happened.
There you go. That's probably a fair
we won't blame it on that. All right, so I went to Cairo last year for the first time. I was there for
excellent.
Like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And it was during Ramadan.
Okay.
But like Cairo was incredibly overwhelming. It was just like and so
that's right.
Seeing the pyramids was worth it, but it was a struggle. Okay. So you said you were there for a year?
Yeah.
All right. So talk about that, because I'm so interested.
Yeah. It's an absolute amazing year. I'm still extremely close with some of the friends that I met out there. And, it was one of those things, because as you said, it's extremely overwhelming. Depending on the calculation, it can be counted as, a top 3 most populous city in the world. It's definitely densely populated. There's folks that clearly don't get counted there because just the infrastructure isn't there to do that. So the estimates of population really fluctuate. And what I would say from the experience and sort of getting used to it is, I got there, was extremely overwhelmed. I was probably being taken advantage of by all kinds of, different folks, paying too much for my cab rides and everything else. And then after being there for a couple of months, then you truly know you're being taken advantage of, but you don't know how to kind of play it. And then from there, you just learn how the city works. And it's an amazing, amazing place where, you can get to know the people, your way around town, where to eat, how to cross the street is a big deal. They stopped drawing lane lines on freeways and highways because cars just ignored them anyway. When I was living there at night, drivers wouldn't turn on their headlights because some actually believe that you got poor gas mileage if you turned on your headlights. And so there were all kinds of accidents associated with that. I remember getting in an argument with a guy who was talking about, how could you say these things about my wonderful city? It's just as modernized as New York City. And then I pointed to a horse-drawn cart on a freeway ramp, just kind of merging onto the freeway. And, so there's so much going on there. But it's also like the center of, the Arab world's entertainment industry, at least from a film standpoint. I know, from an economic standpoint, you're looking at the Gulf, but, you're at a place where, you're in Africa, and then Sinai is in Asia, and you're in the Middle East all at once. And there's just a confluence of so many cultures that come together there. And you're right, it's a very overwhelming place. But you could also be anything you want to there. I got to be a college basketball player.
Yeah. So the sports piece, but the taking advantage of part of, I've never been to, that was my first time in a place that was, I think it was probably considered like an Arab state.
Yeah.
And a few things stuck out to me that were like eye-opening, like one was there's a lot of aggression in how people talk. So it's like, it's just regular talk, but when they're talking English, there's like there's such like definitiveness to what they're saying. It's kind of like there's no,
sure. Yep.
And yeah. And on top of that, one thing that was funny was that like they would complain about the tip. They would be like, "That's way too low."
That's right.
It's like and I was just like, I'm like, I'll take it back. You know what I'm saying? You get nada. How about that?
That's right. Backsheesh. Yeah, the story I always tell is, I lived in a part of town where I'd often take a taxi to campus. And when I first got there, I would pay 5 Egyptian pounds for the taxi ride. And if I gave them £5, then they'd ask for 7, 10, or 15. And because I was paying 5, they knew I didn't know the price, so they would ask for more. After I lived there for a while, I would pay 2 Egyptian pounds and no one would ever say anything to me. So if I would pay 5, they would say, give me 10, give me 15. If I paid 2, they just drive away.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So one other thing was that, like, for men that are friends, they hold hands.
That's right.
And so this, I probably could have read an article and saw this, but I just kind of I just saw it when I was there. So it was just like a lot of men holding hands. And I know in the Arab state, like, that's not like, it wasn't romantic, right?
That's right. That's right.
You have more to say about that, or that's just kind of like?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was interesting to see in a place that is extremely homophobic, and I think homophobic activity, at least when I lived there, I believe was illegal, and so to know that and then see men walking down the street with big smiles on their hands, big smiles on their faces, holding hands, just didn't seem to fit with that dynamic. But it wasn't romantic at all. It was just what friends did, which was cool. And the kissing, right? Men kissing each other, two kisses on the cheek after a handshake.
Yeah, and so the other thing was that it was really easy to get lost. Yeah, it just was like it's a tough city. It's like you shouldn't go there alone, not for safety, but so you can really just kind of like get around, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What I recommend, and again, man, I lived there in 98, 99, so a very long time ago, and I haven't been back. I hope to take my family there when my kids get older, and things are hopefully settled down in the region. But what I tell people is, if you're going to be there for under 2 weeks, overpay for a guide, be willing to pay the tourist prices, just enjoy yourself, see everything, kind of do a little elevated, trip, because it's still so much cheaper than anything you would do day to day here. Like, you can go stay at a super luxurious resort on the Red Sea, and it's probably $40 a night at the resort type thing. So like, if you're paying what might be triple the local price, it still, comes out to just a few dollars here and there. So I say kind of don't worry about that. And then if you're going to be there longer, then you can sort of integrate into the norms of the city. But it can be very frustrating if, you feel like you're being taken advantage of and you're trying to fight that if you're just there for a short period of time. You got to remember, right? Like, you're in a developing country. Folks just don't have, there's no such thing as a middle class. You either are very wealthy for the local standards or you're in poverty. And, a couple bucks from us here and there goes a whole long way there. Because, I talk about the difference between, 2 pounds and 5 Egyptian pounds. When I was there, 1 pound was like, 3 pound, it was like 3.5 pounds to the US dollar. Mm-hmm. So we're just talking, a few cents between 2 and 5 pounds. And it's like, at the end of the day, what are we really talking about?
That's a good perspective, because like if you go there like an American and you trying to like, you have expectations on how to be spoken to, and like,
that's right.
Which is what I had.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good perspective. I want to fast forward a little bit. I want to start talking about your career and their family. How many kids do you have?
I have two. I have a son who is 2.5 and a daughter who is almost 6 months.
So you had a pandemic baby.
I had a pandemic baby. Yeah. She is super chill, man.
What's your kids' names?
Shino is my son's name, and my wife's grandfather, uh, his last name was Shinozaki, and he was actually a kamikaze pilot in World War II, who fortunately did not have to fulfill his mission before the end of the war. But his best friend was killed during the war. They made a pact that if one were to fall, the other would take care of the other's family. And so not only did he take care of his best friend's family, he married his best friend's sister and took their last name. So the last name of Shinozaki left the family, and so we named our son Shino to kind of bring that back into the family. And my daughter's name is Emiko.
Emiko?
Yeah, Emiko.
So your wife is Japanese?
She's half Japanese, half Taiwanese. Her mother's from Japan and her father's from Taiwan. Nice. She's from LA.
Have you read Miyamoto?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have the book and I started the novel, and I was like running through it. It was like at first when I first got it, it was like really hard for me to kind of focus on, and then I got into it, and it's like a beautiful story. So all right, so what you said? Oh yeah, do you have a story about the novel?
Are you talking about the collection of short stories, or?
I'm talking about the extended novel. I think it's either Miyamoto or Mashushi. I'm gonna grab it right now because we're not talking about
yeah, go grab it because we might be talking about different books. You know what? You said Miyamoto, and I was thinking, oh no, I haven't read that. I thought you were talking about this one actually. So
okay. No, yeah, I think the character's name. There's something about a Miyamoto in here somewhere. Maybe it's one of the characters' name, but Musashi. You read this one? You said?
I haven't. No.
Okay. Yeah, it's like it's kind of like Gone with the Wind, as the introduction describes of this book. Okay. It's like one of the most. It's a very important story to like Japanese culture, and it's a story of like a samurai that is sort of like a killer without morals, and gets imprisoned and then studies the art of war, like sort of becomes a philosopher, and then embarks on this journey to be a samurai.
Oh wow! And no, I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's a good one, because when you're talking about the story of the of your wife's grandfather or great grandfather? Grandfather. Yeah. So the honor, like there's like a lot of honor and like weight in that story, and it reminded me of the novel because there are huge overtones of that. So that's dope.
Yeah. And I fortunately got to meet him before he passed, which was great.
You have 2 kids, and we went over their names. So, did you go to grad school? I'm gonna mute this while you talk.
Yeah, I did. I took that PPIA grant and went to NYU. Actually, I went there to study public health because I was sort of following in my father's footsteps, but I had an interest in international public health. And with my experience in the Middle East and studying Arabic, I was looking to do something there. And then 2 weeks after getting to NYU, the towers went down. So folks with an interest and a background in studying Middle East were no longer of interest for, economic and kind of humanitarian causes, more so for national security causes, which wasn't something that I was particularly interested in. The irony of that was at the time I was also accepted to a fellowship with the Navy, and all I had to do was go sign my papers on September 12th, 2001, and that building was destroyed during the attack the day before. This was a time of peace. When I got dropped off to get on that plane to go to NYU, like my dad was, gave me a hug at the gate in the airport, right? Like, how long ago is that? Just the thought of that, right? And so I pivoted pretty quickly after that, particularly after getting some calls from some of the national security groups and agencies that were recruiting. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I had a love of cities, and I was at this program at NYU that was a master's in public administration, and so there were a number of paths to take. So I pivoted to public finance, and I started taking like urban economics courses and economic development courses, and focusing my internships with community development corporations. I worked for one called the Bridge Street Development Corporation that was rehabbing old brownstones in Bed-Stuy and selling them as affordable housing, with also an economic development component, that those brownstones came with basement apartments that could be rented out. So you're spending $250,000 at the time to get a beautiful, brand new, completely gutted rehab brownstone that also had an apartment that you can rent out. That, of course, if you were to sell it now, would probably be worth, $2.5 million. And when I finished there, I went to work for the Annie Casey Foundation in Baltimore. And actually, that's where I first met Fred Blackwell, who runs the San Francisco Foundation. This was in 2003. He was working for the foundation, leading their initiative in Oakland, and I was part of this program, assistantship program that the foundation had, and I was focusing on neighborhood level investments in Indianapolis under their neighborhood initiative. And then I had the opportunity to work for this really cool nonprofit that unfortunately isn't around anymore, called the Social Compact, which was doing these innovative alternative market analyses of underserved communities to actually show how strong the local economics were, what the purchasing power was, what's the informal economy, how many people really live there, because people in our communities oftentimes don't get counted by the census. And we were able to show these more in-depth analyses of these micro locations to help at the time. This was pre-global financial crisis. So at the time when banks and retailers were going into emerging markets in the communities that they had basically ignored for generations. And then I got invited to join a fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, which is really what started my career in urban development. And it was, again, an amazing program that unfortunately isn't around anymore, but it was called the Center for Urban Redevelopment Excellence, where we would spend a semester on campus at Penn taking affordable housing finance classes at Wharton with the business school students. We were taking urban planning classes with the architecture students. We were taking land use with the law students. There was a series of classes where innovative urban developers would come and speak to us every week. And then we got placed with developers around the country that were doing innovative things in urban redevelopment. And so I was placed with McCormick Baron Salazar, which is headquartered in St. Louis, which also happens to be the city in which my father grew up in. So I had a lot of family there, and it was a great experience. And then some of my cohorts went to other developers around the country. The local folks who had participated in that program in the past, like John Stewart participated, Bridge had participated, Mid-Penn Housing, a lot of the Bay Area folks related participated. And it was just a great program. And then during the first 2 years of the placement with the developer, we'd get together with our cohort and either the previous cohort or the following cohort to look at innovative things happening in urban redevelopment. We do these study tours every quarter, and it was just a great, kind of grow your network, learn the business, see what's going on around the country, and just amazing exposure. And that's really where I kickstarted my career in real estate.
I want to get into housing locally and hear your thoughts on where we're at around housing, sort of how the market has responded to the pandemic.
Yeah,
But you were in New York on 9/11.
I was.
And
I
you
saw
know,
the
you said that
second.
like a few iterations ago, but like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
Where
crazy.
were
I
you?
saw. I was in Lower Manhattan. I lived on Third and Mercer at the time, so I wasn't downtown, but I was, Third Street in the Village. Saw the second plane hit from the street. Um, I remember the first plane hit. I was sleeping in that day. I got a call from a Sudanese friend of mine,
Hmm.
and just on the other line, she said, "I didn't do it." I said, "You didn't do what?" She's like, "You haven't turned the news on yet?" Kind of tongue in cheek that, hey, they're going to blame Arabs for that. And I mean, obviously it turned out to be, extremists. But, at the beginning, before folks knew what was going on, she was already just sort of on it, like, kind of joking. I didn't do it. I was like, I didn't do what? And then I turned on the news. I was like, oh man, I got to go. And I ran downstairs. And I remember just kind of looking at the first tower smoking, and I saw the second one hit. And I looked around and I saw people were kind of looking at me funny. And I looked and I had slept in a t-shirt that just had a bunch of Arabic writing on it. I mean, it's one of those things you pick up in the market. And you were in Egypt, so I'm sure you went to Khan el Khalili, which is the old marketplace. And I picked up a t-shirt that in Arabic said Anamish eyes, which just means I don't want, because, everyone's trying to sell you stuff. And so it's like, I don't want gold. I don't want silver. I don't want all this stuff. But, people don't read Arabic. They don't know what it says. And people kind of looking at me. And I'm like, let me go and let me change my shirt. And then a friend of mine who was from Kuwait, but she was Kuwaiti, but she grew up in New York City, viewed herself as a New Yorker. Her father was the Kuwaiti ambassador to the UN. We got together and we actually walked down toward kind of where everything was happening, and did the whole kind of rooting on the first responders and all of that stuff, not having an appreciation of a lot of those folks that we were rooting on were not coming back. And it was a crazy time. And then basically for the next, I forget if it was 2 to 4 weeks, vehicle traffic was shut down from 14th Street all the way south from there. And I lived on 3rd Street. So I could walk down Broadway in my neighborhood and there's no cars, and it's smoky still. And, we see people walking around with masks now because of the pandemic, but that's what it was like down there, because we were still dealing with all of the aftermath associated with that. And so, that huge disaster had a major impact on my life and career, because if it happened later, I would have ended up doing that Navy fellowship, which after grad school, when I was signing up, I was thinking, hey, see the world, we're at peace. You'll be an administrator at a hospital in Barcelona or Tokyo, or then you get all these officers' benefits, to, we're at war. And there was a brother who I studied with in Cairo, great guy. He enlisted in the Army after he graduated from college because he wanted to get his student loans paid. And he was like, all they're going to do is send me to the Monterey Defense Language Institute to study Arabic, and then I'll be out and it'll be great. And they pulled him out of language school, they put him in interrogator school, and then they sent him to Afghanistan. And he was part of those initial wave. Then when we invaded Iraq, he was there. He had all these crazy photographs when he came back of like Saddam Hussein palaces and this, that, and the other, and ended up having a great career in the oil business. But, he wasn't planning on going to war.
Right.
I mean, it's just that one day just sort of changed the trajectory of so many folks. And those are the fortunate folks who didn't lose their lives that day.
Do you speak Arabic?
Not really. I mean, I could order some food. I could tell my taxi driver where to go, but it's not. I wasn't. I studied it at Berkeley. I studied it in Egypt. I studied it in Morocco. But I would by no way to say that I was proficient.
Do you speak any other languages?
Unfortunately, no. I've studied French. I've studied Spanish. I just never had an affinity for any of them sticking. I can
Yeah.
get around a little bit, but
Right.
not a strong proficiency at all.
Yeah, that's
Unfortunately.
me. That's me with French and Spanish too. Like I
Yeah.
studied French. I studied abroad in France.
Oh
And
wow. Where did you study?
I was in Paris. I was at the La Sorbonne.
Oh wow. You studied at the Sorbonne?
Yeah, but I took like a
That's
Spanish though. Don't be impressed.
I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed,
Don't be
man.
impressed.
I gotta be,
I took
man.
a French class at the Sorbonne, and it was, I was placed with the program that, placed us in particular classes.
Sure.
But the benefit for my program in my school was that you can do an immersive language program while you're there, because most people
Yeah.
had to study it before they went. They had to like have, whatever. But yeah, and I keep trying to learn Spanish. I haven't let go of trying to learn Spanish.
So when was the last time you were in Paris?
Studying abroad. That was 2007.
I think you probably appreciate it even more being a little bit older, man. That I don't know if there's a more beautiful urban environment than Paris in
Mm-hmm.
terms of cities.
Right.
I just love it. I can walk for miles and miles in that city.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so beautiful to me.
Yeah, it is a very beautiful city. It was like it was a trip being there because some of the realizations we haven't talked a lot. We talked a lot about culture and some about race, but the issue of race in France for the Black people that live in Paris is like it's really a trip
Yeah.
because this was like I was there during election year where Sarkozy was elected.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's his name.
Yeah.
And
Nicolas Sarkozy. Yeah.
and whenever there's an election year, immigration is always like a national topic.
Yeah.
And so immigration at the time was kind of like, Africans are a drain on our economy.
Mm.
The same way that Americans do that to people from Central America, like,
That's right. Yeah.
Mexicans are taking our jobs. Like that's like the
Yeah.
bigoted narrative here. That was like, that was the case for Africans in France.
Yeah.
But the history of racism isn't really established or like given weight in France. It's much more pervasive here. There's a lot more. It's much more political correctness here. Like they were of the opinion that they didn't see race, right? They were race.
Yeah.
You hear that come from some people in America. Like I don't see race.
I know.
But then and the white Parisians were like, yeah, race is not a problem here. Like I just see a person. Like I don't see it.
Sure.
But they had no Black representation in any of the government agencies. There were
Sure.
the only Black people on TV were criminals. Like there were no, and the sensitivity around like not saying certain things wasn't like a thing. So
yeah.
The other thing about the French is that they treat you like like the way that Americans will make fun of somebody with an accent. Like if you're Chinese, learn you have a Chinese accent speaking English, or
sure.
The French do that if you don't speak French.
Oh yeah.
They look down at you or you're dumb because
Absolutely.
you don't have proficiency in the language. So whenever I fix my mouth to like bash them, I just related how we are to the Americans.
Sure. I mean, it's man, this world, and you look at Europe, and it's how can I put it? The treatment of South Asians in England, Arabs in France, Turks in Germany. It's and the irony is in all those places, it's where, and just like here, I mean, our ancestors were enslaved and brought here, and then we get looked down upon and treated as if we're doing something to them, as if we came here in search of a better life. And the French Empire expanded throughout North and West Africa, and so they do the same to those folks. And the Brits, they colonized the Indian subcontinent and all the countries that have since kind of broken up from that. And then those are the folks who live in public housing in those major cities, right? I mean, it's the same narrative all over the world, man.
So you were there at 9/11. You've had this whole career around housing. You're now in real estate. Where do you work currently?
Yeah, so I'm managing director for the West Coast at Jonathan Rose Companies, which is a company that's headquartered in New York City. It's a real estate development company that's really focused on affordable housing development and the preservation of affordable housing. The company's been around 30 plus years and really built its reputation on being an innovator of sustainable building and green building, and was an early adopter and continues to kind of push the envelope on that. In October, we closed our fifth preservation fund for preserving affordable housing. It was $525 million that we can leverage with traditional or agency debt without using tax credits or tax exempt bonds to acquire existing affordable housing that's in danger of losing its status as affordable housing, or something that I'm really excited about for the Bay Area market is being able to compete against some of the larger institutional players who buy rent control properties and then look to bring up the rents to market. We can be just as competitive by partnering with nonprofit organizations to create a structure that allows us to cap rents and put restrictions on at 80% of the area's median income and below. And we can also tier it to lower incomes. And by in return getting a property tax exemption, we can pay just as much for those buildings as the folks that want to take everything to market. And so I'm really excited about being able to do that execution in the Bay Area and in places like Los Angeles, where we're losing affordable housing, every year, as well as needing to build more. So I get to build new affordable housing as well as preserve existing affordable housing.
The affordable housing aspect of development, like it is a popular discussion. Housing is big, right? In our region.
That's right. Yep.
And in my brief attempt at supervisor, one of my
Are we able to talk about that a little more? Because I must admit I was very disappointed when I saw that email that you were deciding not to run after all.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
I really want to know, because the funny thing is, you and I would bump into each other in the city in kind of random places. I remember the first two times we met, but I'm not sure which one happened first. But then I was like, the fact that I saw you in both of those spaces, I was like, I need to know this cat. I think the first time we were invited to a dinner in the Fillmore with a bunch of other Black folks who were living in the city, doing things from arts to education to business and everything in between. And it was a really cool get together. And then the next time I bumped into you was at an elementary school in the Bayview when I was reading. It was like the annual kind of read to a class day. And I'm like, okay, you're here too. Okay. And then, from there, I saw you were running for something. I remember bumping you in the BART and just be like, man, you need to ask me for money. Let me support your campaign. I just want you to text me and say, please support my campaign, and I'm going to send you some money. And so I was, when I saw you were running for supervisor, I was excited and I was waiting for that text or that call. And then I got the email that you were stepping away, and I was really disappointed.
Yeah. Thank you for donating, and I appreciate it. That was my intro. It's very generous. I think it was the Wiseman. It could have been that, or it could have been like the thing that I did with Tyra and Charles at the art gallery.
That's what. Yeah, that was. I know Tyra. I remember Tyra was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she grew up a Baha'i as well. I don't know if you knew that about her.
She grew up where?
A Baha'i, the same religion that I am.
Oh no, I didn't know that. No, I know she grew up. I think she grew up in DC. I want to get into the religion too, because I'm actually not familiar with it.
Yeah.
But I want to learn more about it. Um, when I won the school board race in 2016, I had, you know, I had aspirations to do more, but it was interesting because as I was on the school board, I was also running a nonprofit called Mission Bit, which,
Mhm.
you know, my first 2 years on the school board were kind of a blur because running that nonprofit took everything from me.
Yeah.
You know, it was like it was a lot of energy and focus, and it ended up paying off. But one of the things that I realized, I think, with the way that my race panned out, I decided late to actually run for supervisor.
Okay.
And I think that if you're running for an office, you should like do it. You should kind of lay the groundwork,
Hmm.
right? So the groundwork or what it takes to be successful on the school board is not really connected to what it takes to have a viable supervisor campaign.
Got it.
And the one of the major gaps with that is just being more present in the neighborhood, right? Because like I can be
Hmm.
like, so people can do that strategically. They can have more of an emphasis on the schools in the area where you want to be supervisor,
Yeah.
or you can go to more community events. But because I grew up, my family's been here since the 40s, right? So I
Wow.
have like all this historic context to the neighborhood. And if the pandemic not started, I would have kept running. What the pandemic did to the campaign was, you know, I decided to run in January. We launched in February. Everything shut down mid-March, right?
Yeah.
You know, at the time, raising money from like March till May was just like, you know, everyone was struggling. Like no one was raising money. And I was trying to unseat an incumbent
Hmm.
who had just got elected, who was only going to be there for a year. So the calculation for me was
Who was the incumbent?
the incumbent is Dean Preston. The quick backstory behind that was, you know, when the area I was running for supervisor, the mayor was supervisor of this neighborhood. She was supervisor of
Oh,
District
yeah,
5,
of course.
and then she became mayor.
Yep.
She had to appoint her replacement, and I was on her short list for being appointed.
Okay.
She ended up selecting Valley Brown.
Yep.
And the way our elections work here is if there's an appointment, it triggers a special election.
Hmm.
So you don't finish the person's term, you have to run for the seat as soon as the next
Got it.
term. So London becomes mayor in 2018. She selects Valley Brown to replace her. Valley has to run in November of 2019 to finish the term, which ends 2020.
Hmm.
Now Valley Brown loses to Dean Preston, which was like really like there's a whole story behind that.
Yeah.
My initial attempt to run should have been that cycle. I should have run against Valley and Dean for the seat. Now Dean had just beat Valley fair and square, and now he had to run again in a year to keep a 4-year term.
Got
So
it.
so he won in November. I decided in January to run against him. Launched in February, and so you know everyone was kind of like, didn't we just have a race? And all the people that really liked me
Yeah.
liked him, so they were
Okay.
like, I can't help you because we kind of
Uh,
just helped him win.
it is back
So
to right. It is back to win. Right.
why would we want
Yeah.
him to
Yeah.
lose? But I
Yeah.
was like, I want the job. I don't care if he won. I want the job.
Right.
And
Right.
so um, it would have been so if I had the even if I didn't have the money, if I had the time and space to just like get in front of people,
Yeah.
I could have been competitive. But door knocking, handing out flyers, getting
Sure.
signatures, like all that's done. None of that's happening,
Yeah.
you know. And the deadline for me, this is probably a really long answer, but it's the first
No,
time I really talk about it.
honestly, I've had this question floating since I got that email. So I'm glad to finally get the story.
Well, so you know, March everything shuts down. In May, we have to start to file to be on the ballot for November. So I'm going to be, you know, I have to decide like is it worth it to try and ask people to keep helping me? I don't know how long this is going to go. I don't have, everything was stalled for a few months. I can't run the type of race that I want to run to really be competitive. That May, June deadline of being on the ballot, I decided I would cut my losses and not continue. And so that's what ended up like prompting the decision. So what ended up happening is that very same day that I stopped, by coincidence, Valley re-entered the race to run against Dean again. And in November, he beat her again.
Yeah.
So the race in 2019, it was close. He won by like 200 votes.
Man, that's close.
In this one, it was like nowhere near close. So he'll be supervisor unless for some reason something happens from now until 2024.
Do you have your eyes set on 24?
Not right now. And housing is one of the reasons, which is what I want to get into want to get into with you, because as I was running for supervisor, pathways to home ownership was one of the things I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
And when you talk to longstanding Black residents, especially people that have seen people get pushed out or whatever the case may be, long-term tenants or long-term residents of public housing, the sentiment is, why can't we own this place, right? Mm-hmm. And we just want to stay here. Why can't we just have a mortgage instead of rent? And so there are these various different types of, lending practices that help people get homes.
Yeah.
And the discussion around development, really right now, most of what I hear about development is below market rate, but the ownership opportunities with some of those units or homes isn't at all like, it seems like there's no real advantages.
I think the city's program is focused more on a shared equity structure to be able to keep the long-term affordability versus focusing on the fact that, in the history of our country, the biggest transfer of wealth from generation to generation has been through home ownership. And when, for example, my grandfather came back from fighting in World War II as a Buffalo soldier and the GI Bill, while the white folks who came back got to use that GI Bill to buy a house in a neighborhood that would appreciate, we were redlined out of those opportunities. And so we could only buy homes in places like East Cleveland, for example, that had no opportunity to grow in value. And so that wealth transfer to the next generation couldn't happen. And now that we can legally buy in these neighborhoods, it's for the majority of us a false right because we didn't have the benefit of that generational wealth passing down to be able to afford to buy in these neighborhoods.
Yeah, so you're very familiar with the history and you've lived it like I have. And so the big policy question is like, why can't we figure out a way to get people into homes, right? So with the affordable housing work that you do, it's what you briefly described sounds really amazing. What is your general description of what's happening? What is your commentary of what's happening in the Bay around housing?
There was pre-pandemic dynamics, right? And then there's post-pandemic dynamics. And whenever I have a conversation about how expensive housing is in the Bay Area, I do like to remind people that back in 2010, I would say 2009, 2010, into 2011, there were all kinds of foreclosures and short sales and heavily discounted houses on the market during that time. Now, of course, to benefit from that, you had to have cash, and a lot of people didn't have jobs at that point. And so again, when I talk about kind of false right, but it was also a period in time where you could buy, in 2011, you could buy a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo in downtown Oakland for $215,000. That existed as recently as 2011. I was renting when I first came back to the Bay Area after moving from St. Louis. I was actually living right across the street from now Vice President-elect Kamala Harris on a small alley street in Soma on Clara between 5th and 6th. And I was renting a place, but I remember there were so many foreclosures and short sales of those loft buildings and condos, and folks trying to get out of them at prices that if we saw today, we'd be like, oh my gosh, now it's, at the prices that BMR units would go to. So, this stuff is cyclical. It never feels like it when you're in it. And we are absolutely in a crisis, particularly pre-pandemic, where we went generations basically without building new housing at all levels. And so that took away a lot of opportunity. I'm someone who firmly believes it's not development that causes displacement, that it's the lack of development that causes displacement. And the analogy that I give folks is, if we're going to have all these tech jobs and all these finance jobs, and we're going to be this big employment center, and we're not going to build the housing to allow those folks to live close by and all the services that go along with it. And one person has $3,000 a month to pay rent for their apartment, but there's no $3,000 a month houses. But someone who's been living in a $1,500 a month apartment, but this other person has $3,000 and can give that person $3,000 to live there, then the $1,500 person is going to lose their place. But if the $3,000 unit was built, that $3,000 person wouldn't be taking away that $1,500 apartment. And so that's why we really need to, and I'm someone, I've built thousands of units for people earning, below 50% of the area median income, down to for housing for people who have $0 income, where we give them a check every month so that they can pay their utility bills. I mean, that's the breadth of housing that I built my career on. And I haven't been someone, I did work in the equity world for a while where we were doing market rate investments there, but the bulk of my career has been building affordable housing. But we really need housing across the board. And the irony now, and I sit here in the East Bay, over the next 3 years, the city of Oakland, I believe, is going to deliver about 6,000 units of rental housing. So we basically didn't build anything for generations. Now, all of a sudden, we're delivering all these units at the same time. And we're doing it in an era, because of the pandemic, where these high-paying jobs from your Facebooks and your Googles of the world, which was really what was driving the demand, first in San Francisco, then that got to be too expensive, so people were moving on the other side of the bridge. We're delivering all these units for these workers who are now being told, you know what, you don't have to be in the region anymore because we're not going to require you to come back to the office. And so we've already seen 20, 30% drops in rent across the board in the more dense areas of the Bay Area, because those with means are able to pick up. And in some cases, they're going as close to Sacramento, where they can buy a house and have a home office and work out of that. And to more extreme cases, they're going to places like Texas and Florida, where they don't have to pay state income tax, right? And so in the short term, we're going to see rents drop, and it'll be interesting to see if people are able to take advantage of that and get the housing, that's historically not been available. And then over the next few years, as these all of a sudden we get the supply that we've needed for so long, there's going to be significant rent drops during that period for the near term. And then the cycle is going to go back again because San Francisco, the city of your birth and where you live, will always be 7 miles by 7 miles, surrounded by water on 3 sides, and people are going to want to be there.
For a lot of people that grow up here, there's this like struggle to hold on, and it seems like holding on feels like also fighting to hold on.
Yeah.
And one of the, I think, brilliant things, I've talked about Last Black Man in San Francisco before on the podcast. I'm not a huge fan of the movie.
Yeah.
One of the things I think they nailed was that sentiment, like people are fighting to hold on. But another brilliant thing about it was, the main character is fighting for a home that he thinks his great grandfather built or his grandfather built, and who actually didn't build it. So he's actually fighting for a lie, like he's fighting for a story that's a lie. And so the light bulb for me was like, is the fight to hold on a lie, right? Are we fighting to hold on to something that's not true? Like what actual benefit, stake, ownership, like do we have over a place, and what would it be like to build that somewhere else?
Yeah.
So, I was already struggling with that tension, and I think the movie portrayed that. So do you want to comment to that before I go on to this other point?
Yeah, it's San Francisco is such an interesting dynamic, right? Because like New York City, it's principally a renter city. When I was doing work in the Bayview, I was leading the redevelopment in a previous job. When I was with McCormick Grand Salazar, I was leading the redevelopment of the Alice Griffith community into a mixed income community out in the Bayview, and looking at some of those neighborhood dynamics in sort of the last neighborhood where Black people are living in the city of San Francisco, also the neighborhood with the highest home ownership rates. What do you do if you've been a homeowner in a neighborhood that has really suffered under disinvestment for multiple generations, and things are changing, investment's coming? So first it was the T line, and don't get me started on how long that ride takes to get to the Bayview on the T.
T is the worst. Is the worst.
It is
transit.
The absolute worst.
Yeah.
But it was a major investment that happened there. You had Lennar/Five Point, what they've largely done in the shipyard, and what's trying to be done in Candlestick Point. And so investment is coming, change is coming, but you are now a senior citizen and someone knocks on your door and is willing to pay you $1 million for your house, while us younger Black folks might be saying, hey, hold on to that. That's going to be an asset for your family. It's like, but I've been waiting generations. Like, you're telling me I have to wait longer, and someone is putting more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime. Like, what do you do in that situation? It's a tough one. And yes, there's the narrative, and there's definitely people being priced out and pushed out. But then there's also the people who are just like, you know what? I'm going to take my check. I'm going to buy a house in Antioch with a pool, and I'm going to have cash left over for that and more space. And I don't have to deal with everything that I've been dealing with for the past 60 years.
Right. And the other aspect to that is the condition of the city for how much it costs.
That's right.
Which is right. Like a whole other discussion.
That's Pan Bay Area, right? Like that. It's just it's unbelievable that we can have so much wealth everywhere and so much despair, poverty, homelessness, mental health issues. It's shameful.
Yeah, and so it asks sort of the calculation or on the pro con, like, hold on, what am I fighting to hold on to? Like what
Right.
is and then you start to travel a bit, you go to Houston, Atlanta, DC, right? Young
Yeah.
black man
Yeah.
looking for, you know, a professional community that you can tie into. You want to
That's
see
right.
people that represent, like, love your culture, that reflect your values, that like share your interests, and you want to be able to own something. It's like, what am I hold on, what? you
Right.
know it
That's
all
right.
starts to become very like it doesn't make any sense unless you're holding on to that romantic fighter. Like, it could be some other things that's keeping you here too, but
Yeah.
kind of feels like leaving the matrix a little bit, start to open up your eyes and your options. So
Have you
um,
lived in any of those chocolate cities? I got a chance to live in DC, and that was just an amazing experience for me.
I haven't. No, I'm a frequent traveler
Okay.
to some of them, but I've never. I went to college in Massachusetts, and I was like on campus in Northwest Mass.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in New York.
Remind me where you went to school.
I went to Williams.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I know some guys I grew up swimming with ended up swimming there and playing water polo there.
Yeah, water polo. That's a vicious sport.
Yeah.
They're kind of mean.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
um, okay, so yeah, but it all kind of comes back to housing, and were you following Scott Wiener's bill?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to comment on that because of your employer, or what was?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, this is just reporting facts at this point.
Hmm.
The legislature didn't the state legislature didn't pass any housing production bills in the last session. So, as much as there's an acknowledgement of the housing crisis that we're in, we didn't do anything as a state to actually move forward with being able to address it. And I the NIMBY issues in the Bay Area, maybe it's even beyond the Bay Area, but I'll speak to where we live, are pretty ironic in that lower income communities don't want market rate housing, higher income communities don't want affordable housing. Mixed income communities perform the best and provide the best outcomes for our community, but both sides agree basically that they don't want to live together, and so nothing gets built.
Hmm.
And that's been sort of the result of our housing policy in the state of California, and the lack of supply that's been delivered over generations. And it really hurts my heart when I see our communities push back on investment coming into them. I do believe, though, that there is an opportunity if you lead with affordable and mixed income housing of scale in our communities, then you're able to establish additional affordable housing, preserve affordable housing for people in the neighborhood, create some economic activity, and then kind of the luxury stuff can follow. And then the community can benefit from all of the retail and restaurants and everything else that comes with it. And then you have housing that's in place that will always remain affordable. That's the way that I grew up in this business, doing neighborhood revitalization.
Hmm.
After Hurricane Katrina, we did about 1,000 units down there of mixed income housing, where we replaced the public housing that was there. We mixed it with additional affordable housing and with market rate housing. Mixed income housing isn't a thing in California. I think I know why, but it's very frustrating when, in New Orleans, in one development, we did 460 units that were developed in over 100 buildings, and every building had public housing replacement units in it, affordable housing units in it, and market rate units in them. There was no physical difference between a unit. If someone moved out of a 2-bedroom market rate unit the same day that someone moved out of a 2-bedroom public housing unit, the next folks who moved in, it might be the public housing family moving into where the market family moved out of, and vice versa. like that to me is the model. And when I came out to the West Coast and we were redeveloping Alice Griffith, that's what I preached and preached and preached and said that's what we should do here. And we weren't able to do that. I was absolutely a proponent of Scott Wiener's bill, and any bill that allows for more housing production, because when there's more housing production, like I said before, with the whole $3,000 versus $1,500, when there's more housing for everyone, then there's less pressure on lower income folks.
You say you think you know why? Why?
Yeah. So
why?
So there's the pessimistic Yusef, and then there's maybe it's not as bad as that, and I'll give you kind of both sides of it. On one side, there is such a need for affordable housing that I can appreciate wanting to concentrate resources on the most deeply targeted affordability as possible. So I can appreciate that. The cynic in me says that it's hard to structure and it's hard to finance. And in California, where you have, market rate for-profit developers over here who don't want to have to do any affordable housing, and nonprofit affordable housing developers over there who don't want any of those resources going into buildings that have market rate housing, then you have both sides agreeing on the one thing that they shouldn't mix. But I grew up in this business looking at the negative impact on urban America that concentrating and not maintaining public housing had in places like St. Louis, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, all these places where we concentrated the most very low income people in our communities, and we didn't provide the resources necessary to maintain that housing, and they became physically and socially unsafe places that were concentrated that the rest of the cities could kind of turn their backs on. And by providing opportunities for low-income folks to have different norms and live in communities where they see, Black men putting on a sport coat and going to work, or just Black men getting up, going to work, I think that can have a significant impact on some younger folks so that they see that norm. And that's why, I really like the whole economic integration concept of mixed income housing. And it may sound paternalistic. I get that. Like I respect any pushback on that, but I think changing norms and letting folks know what's possible is a big thing, and providing the affordable housing to first stabilize a family's living situation, and then allowing that next generation to grow up and have access to more opportunity and change their family's trajectory is a special thing. And it's not just bricks and sticks. You need the supportive services and wraparound support as well. But the housing is a big part of it.
You mentioned, so what's the name of the religion you said that you were?
Oh, I'm a member of the Baha'i faith.
Baha'i. Well, so I never heard of that, actually. What is Baha'i?
Basically, we believe in progressive revelation, where we view Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, Muhammad, and then our prophets, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, all as manifestations of God and prophets of the same God who brought the message for the people for that particular period. And it's very progressive religion, where there are explicit tenets of racial unity, equality of men and women. It started in Iran, but the first Baha'i was actually a white officer in the Massachusetts 54th, the first Black Civil War regiment. And actually my great uncle's grandfather my great uncle, who was a Baha'i, his grandfather fought in that regiment, and that's where my family first learned of the faith. My father was a Baha'i, and then he learned the faith from his aunt and uncle, who he spent his summers with in Michigan when he was growing up. But most of my family is Christian. My mother was raised Methodist. My grandmother is a faithful member of Easter Hill Methodist Church in Richmond, California. And, that side of my family moved out to the Bay Area so that my grandfather could work in the shipyards in San Francisco. And then one day folks came by and said, "Hey, we're hiring folks for the Richmond shipyards too." And so that's how we ended up in the East Bay. But, roots go back to the 40s, like yours, to San Francisco.
And so is the faith something that you still have, you're doing with your kids, or is it?
I haven't really introduced religion yet. Religion was, well, my father was Baha'i, my mother was Christian, and they remained married. I think they argued before I was born how they were going to raise me. And so my dad just said, "You can raise him Christian. When he's 18, he'll make his own decision." I didn't know about that story, but when I was out in New York at Fordham and I turned 18, I guess I was 18 my sophomore year, I just called my dad and asked him to send me some books on the Baha'i faith, and I read them, and it just really resonated. The social progressive message resonated, I would say, initially more than the spiritual side of it. Mm-hmm. Just to be so explicit about, equality of men and women, racial unity, universal education. I mean, these are just things that just made a lot of sense. And then the connection with all these, global faiths that, hey, we're all out here worshiping the same God. And it just was a different message for what the people needed in a particular place or a particular time. So I will definitely teach them the faith as the kids get older, but I haven't introduced them to it yet.
So we went over a lot of your story. We have the rapid fire aspect of our discussion coming. I appreciate all of your insights and your time today. You ready for the rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Do you meditate?
Not enough.
What's one book you would recommend?
The Black Count by Tom Rees.
Do you have a motto?
Yeah, that 80% of the stuff you do in your life probably just requires threshold, and 20% requires true focus. So spend 80% on the 20% that matters and 20% on the 80% where you can just check a box.
Okay. That's a great motto. What personal weakness can you forgive in someone?
All of them. We all have our challenges.
Okay, last and final question. The house is on fire. All the family members, all the pets are out. What's 3 things you grab?
I grab the teddy bear from my son's bedroom that was my teddy bear. I grabbed my Selmer Mark VI tenor saxophone, and I grabbed my Audemars Piguet Royal Oak extra thin jumbo.
Okay. I just realized we didn't get to talk about the watches during.
All good, man. All good.
This is Yusef Freeman. This is Cook on Monday Morning, the final discussions. I appreciate you for your time. It's awesome hearing more about your story. Thank you again.
This was a blast. Thank you.
Peace. And thank you for listening to another episode of Cook on Monday Morning. At Cook on Monday Morning, we are building lives that make us excited about Monday morning. We believe that if you can own Monday morning, you can own the week. If you can own the week, you can own the year. And if you change your year, you can change your life. Thank you again for listening. And thank you for subscribing. Please do so if you haven't already. I'm grateful for your support. Please share the podcast with a friend. Also, help us grow this community of doers. Please take a minute to also rate and review the podcast on Apple. Leave a comment on YouTube. It really helps people hear about and find what we're doing here. If you're interested in starting your own podcast, I wrote an article. It's called How to Start a Podcast During the Pandemic. You can check the article in the description box if you want to see how I started this one, the equipment we use, some book recommendations that'd be helpful to consider. Check that out when you get a chance. Cook on Monday Morning is a product of the Luther Harris Holding Company. We work in partnership to create solutions that drive impact. We build strategic partnerships between businesses and government. We recruit diversity talent into high impact roles, and we help companies drive impact in the places where they do business. If you'd like to learn more about that, feel free to email me, info@stevoncook.com. I'd like to thank the people that make our podcast possible. Our videographer, David Topete. Thank you, David. Our copy editors, Fernando Encico Marquez and Devin Sketchinger. Thank you both also. I get up every morning with the intention to create value and showcase my love to the people that keep our cities moving. You are our teachers, garbage collectors, school lunch workers, custodians, social workers, fire workers, police officers, EMT workers, bus drivers, and nurses. You are our employers, the people helping create jobs and keeping our economy growing. You are our gig workers, stocking our shelves, driving our ride shares, delivering our food. To all of you, this podcast is for you. You live in places like San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, Antioch, San Mateo, Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Miami, Orlando, the Carolinas, Virginia Beach, Milwaukee, Kansas City, Cleveland, Detroit, Harlem, Brooklyn. Shout out to all of our listeners also on the continent and around the world, Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica, Kenya, and Ethiopia. To all of you, this podcast is for you. This message is touching the world and will continue to do so because of you. Until we meet again. Peace, and we out.